It's a well-written bill, and I wish it were bipartisan. I wish more of my Republican colleagues would join with us. But I think I'm learning on this issue, and quite frankly, on a lot of other important issues, that we don't seem to share the same values. Um, we have some members of this House on the Republican side who don't believe we have a climate crisis. Where's the ability to compromise with people who don't think that this is a reality? And yet, my friends say, well, we should have a bill that incorporates more Republican values. Look, we have to tackle these issues. My friends were in charge for 2 years under this administration and really didn't do anything. We're now coming up with a major infrastructure bill that I think will not only help with a lot of the issues that we all say we care about, but will help transform this economy in the aftermath of this terrible pandemic. And you want to know what's a job killer? This pandemic is a job killer, which makes it even more frustrating that we have a president who doesn't want to listen to the best medical advice and can't even bring himself to say the word mask. So, I don't know what else to say other than the fact that, I represent a district that is urban, suburban, and rural. And there are things in this bill that would be a benefit to all parts of my district. And as Mr. Neal pointed out, the investments in rail infrastructure, I think, are incredibly important, not just in Massachusetts, by the way, but all over this country. In any event, I want to commend Mr. DeFazio for his leadership on this, and Mr. Neal and others who support it. And again, and by the way, if the Senate doesn't like the bill, they can pass their own. We can go to a conference committee and work out the differences. Same goes with the HEROES Act as well. Yeah, the notion that Mitch McConnell hasn't done anything after we passed the HEROES Act on, I think, May 15th, when our cities and towns are in desperate need of help, so they don't cut essential services, and is appalling to me. But in any event, thank you for your testimony. I now yield to my ranking member, Mr. Cole.
Thank you very much, let me just point out for the record that Mr. McConnell actually crafted a bill that passed. It was actually called, the CARES Act. That actually began the Senate, and they succeeded because they actually involved Democrats, both in the Senate and frankly across the rotunda.
Maybe would the gentleman yield?
I certainly yield to the chairman.
Yeah, I would just simply say that, yeah, he did take the initiative on the CARES Act, which, in our opinion, was too stilted toward corporate interests and gigantic companies. It was the House input that actually brought it down so that it actually helped a lot more working people. I'm just simply saying that there's an example where, we both chambers passed a bill and we worked out the differences in conference. And so rather than do nothing, please use your influence to tell Mr. McConnell to do something, and we can see you in conference.
Well, actually, he involved Democrats from the beginning of the bill, unlike what's in front of us today. They worked on it together across partisan lines in the Senate, then they worked on it with us. That's not what we're seeing here, Mr. Chairman. Let me go to my questions, though. Mr. Davis, you've been around not a long time as a member, but a fair amount of time, and a long time as a staffer. Most of the time, in your experience, transportation bills, passed with huge bipartisan votes?
Mr. Davis,
Hey, Rodney, you're muted.
Yeah, that's good stuff. I want you guys to hear this.
You clearly, after this much time with remote hearings, you would think I would learn how to work with the mute button. So I apologize to everyone, but all I was doing was complimenting you, Chairman McGovern, the entire time.
About the remote hearings? Yeah.
No. I was complimenting you personally, and everybody here is my witness. To answer Ranking Member Cole's question, yes, I have been a part of every other surface transportation reauthorization. I've been a part of here or that I worked as a staffer on have been overwhelmingly bipartisan. That's why I sought a seat on the House Transportation Committee, because I saw it as one of the most bipartisan committees. And I also sought a seat on the House Agriculture Committee that I served with Chairman McGovern on. And that had been, and I hope can get back to being one of the most bipartisan committees. You know me, Mr. Chair. Even the Lugar Center ranks me as the 13th most bipartisan member of Congress out of 435 members in the House. I want to work on things in a bipartisan way. I thank Chairman DeFazio for working with me on a THC level amendment that I know is in the manager's amendment. Those are good positive steps. But in the entirety of this process, Republicans like me, Republicans like Brian Fitzpatrick, the #1 most bipartisan member of the House, according to the Lugar Center, folks like John Cadco, who serve on this committee, we were all, Troy Balderson, all shut out of the process when we had a clear record of being able to work with the other side. This is not what I came to Congress to do. I came to Congress to come up with good agreements. And when the chair mentions we ought to pass a bill, this is a fait accompli. We know, Mr. Ranking Member, that most, if not all of our Republican amendments are going to get ruled out of order. We know that they're going to pass a partisan bill. I certainly can't wait to get to a conference committee. I like the bill that the Senate passed in a bipartisan way. We ought to be able to do that in the House. But when you have a bill that is being marked up, and then all of a sudden, in the midst of that 24-hour markup over 2 days, it gets changed, the name changes, another $1 trillion gets added to it. My question is, why in the world didn't the Transportation Committee continue to lead on this? Well, we know why. The Speaker and the Speaker's agenda hijacked it, and that's not the way it's been in the past. I certainly hope it's not the way in the future if we can come up with a conference agreement.
Chairman DeFazio, is there any particular reason why you chose not to work in a bipartisan fashion? I mean, it's very different from what we've seen under both Democratic and Republican chairman of this committee for many, many years.
I addressed that in my opening remarks, but I'll address it again. The Republicans offered an alternative called the Starter Act. It did not deal with climate change in any way, not one word, not one sentence, not one section, not one penny. Unlike John Barrasso, comes from an oil and gas state, he put a couple of $1 billion into fossil fuel reduction. Now we're going beyond that in terms of policies and expenditures, because he doesn't believe in climate change either. But in order to get the bill out of committee, he did that. But they offered an alternative that did none of those things. And at the beginning, I said, this is going to be green. And they said, well, don't count us out. Well, then the Barrasso bill passes, and the Republican staff was appalled. They couldn't believe that he included fossil fuel reduction. So from day one, we knew that we could not get to that point. So we wrote a comprehensive bill. We adopted 34 Republican amendments in a 24-hour markup. The 31 of their amendments, which we defeated, were to remove the climate change provisions. So I think the answer is pretty darn clear. And if you don't believe in climate change, then they're in exactly the right place.
Well, that's not the question I asked. I really asked about the entire bill, not just one where you didn't agree. Are there other areas you could have worked with the Republicans on? Because they don't.
I'm not responsible.
We don't get the impression that you chose to work with them on anything.
Well, sir, I didn't write anything beyond my committee's jurisdiction. I did roads, bridges, highways, transit, rail, wastewater, harbors, and that. Any of the other provisions that have been mentioned, tax credits and that would be Chairman Neal. The other issues, like broadband, is energy and commerce. And as I mentioned earlier, the president did include that in his proposal for infrastructure, which never got proposed. So you would have to ask other committee chairs or others. I had, those were not written by me, and I'm not, fully knowledgeable of all their provisions.
Do you think that's a good way to proceed, though? Because you normally have a bill that's pretty bipartisan. Maybe we put too many things in this where there's too many disagreements.
Well, I explained my bill. and I can't really, go beyond my provisions in
I was
terms
just
of.
asking you in general, do you approve of this as a process? I mean, because the reality is, as Mr. David suggested in his testimony, this will get through the House, but it's not getting through the Senate. It's not going to be signed with the president. Now, and we'll have a conference hopefully where we can negotiate out some of these differences, but gosh, we usually start your portion of this bill, which usually is a standalone, in a very bipartisan way. That just didn't happen this time. I'm just curious as to why.
Well, there was also mention of the $1.5 trillion cost. I do remember a really, really, bad bill that passed without a single Democratic vote that cost more than $2 trillion, which was a tax gift to the wealthiest among us. The principal beneficiaries, 85% went to people over $400,000 a year. A lot of the jobs we're going to create here are going to go to people who need jobs.
Be happy to debate the tax bill with you on another occasion, although your statistics are just flat wrong. But let me go to Mr. Davis, if I may. Chairman mentioned that there were 31, 34, I think he said, Republican amendments that were adopted. I think that's great. How many were rejected?
There were 112 amendments total that were put forth. And as a matter of fact, let me get back to you on the exact amount. There were actually 240 amendments were considered. And but I do want to address the climate issue because Chairman DeFazio knows that we laid out in our principles that we put into the Starter Act. I mean, Ranking Member Graves, I got to give him a lot of credit. He was able to help us craft what our starting principles were. We laid them out for the majority so they knew where we would begin a negotiating process. I always thought that's how you got a bill put together in a bipartisan way. And part of those principles were resiliency standards. We included an entire resiliency title that was led by our ranking member of the Select Committee on Climate and whatever the rest of the name of that select committee is, Garrett Graves. And there's nobody better to talk about resiliency and climate issues than the person on our committee, Congressman Garrett Graves, who was there to rebuild New Orleans as the lead state official in the state of Louisiana that was going to, that helped rebuild that system after Hurricane Katrina and worked with the permitting process, understands resiliency and the effects of climate more than most. And that's a title that should have led to discussions. Just because it didn't say climate change or Green New Deal didn't mean that many resiliency standards we put forth, Mr. Cole, were not part of an agenda to allow for better building standards in areas that are hit by changes in our climate, especially like Louisiana. And there were 248 amendments considered, 112 were rejected, and many of the Republican amendments we had to negotiate at the end of the evening after 22 hours of 2 days. We negotiated with the chair and his staff to at least allow for some of our common sense amendments to be put into the base of the bill. I clearly hope that that agreement to put those in is not destroyed by the Rules Committee and having those pulled out before that bill gets to the floor, because that was one small yet negotiated at the end of the markup. That was a small victory for bipartisanship in a bill that clearly was anything but bipartisan as a whole.
Let me ask you this, Mr. Davis, if I may. The statistics that I've been given, and I assume are correct, is that about 2 out of every $5 of the T&I bill or section are actually tied to specific parts of the Green New Deal. And if is this simply an effort to use the transportation bill to bring more controversial legislation out of the Green New Deal? And if that is the case, what's that do to the prospects of actually getting a transportation bill passed this Congress?
Well, you and I both know, Mr. Ranking Member, that it just kills the prospects. I actually feel bad for many of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle and colleagues on our side of the aisle on the T&I committee, because again, in the midst of this markup, again, 24 hours over 2 days, in the midst of this markup, the Democratic leadership decided to take the bill we were marking up and put it into a larger package. And this is where we are today. They changed the name in the middle of a markup. They changed priorities. If this isn't if this isn't a process that's wholly led by the speaker suite and the people who work in the speaker suite, then I would love to be proven wrong on that. But the facts are the facts. And if this is the partisan bill that the Democrats want to put forth, then we're clearly choosing messaging over progress. And we can come together on a bipartisan surface bill. Let's, if you want to pass a partisan surface bill, take the surface transportation portion out, pass it on the floor. Let's get to a conference committee. Let's get something done.
Last question, just on that, again, going back to history, have you ever seen this many things added to a surface transportation bill in the past? Again, this is something we've done in a very bipartisan fashion. Didn't matter who was running Congress at that particular time. And quite often, we had, as we have today, divided government. That, if anything, means you usually got to aim smaller, not bigger, to actually get something done. So is this unprecedented in your view, what we're seeing here?
Well, I've been a member of Congress for one surface reauthorization, the FAST Act. And we had the majority in the House, we had the majority in the Senate, and we were able to still craft what we call the Four Corners Agreement. As a matter of fact, Mr. Ranking Member, when this Congress began, I asked Ranking Member Graves to appoint me as the ranking member of the Highways and Transit Subcommittee. It's the largest subcommittee in Congress. We have 59 members on that subcommittee. And I was excited because I thought we would sit down and use the exact same process that then Chairman Schuster used to be able to have the ranking member of the entire committee, the chair and the ranking member of the Highways and Transit Subcommittee, sit in a room, hammer out agreements, where Chairman Schuster's process was there was nothing that was going to be in the underlying bill that all four corners, Republicans and Democrats, didn't agree to. And then frankly, as a committee member who had provisions that they didn't agree to, it was sometimes my own party was against my amendments after a bipartisan agreement was put forth in the underlying bill. And that's a huge difference from where we were. And Chairman DeFazio and the Democrats who serve on the committee, they heard our pleas during the committee process. Things were changed. It was a process that harkened back, and there was a lot of mention about previous transportation infrastructure bills that I was never a part of. But the one that I was a part of was nothing but bipartisan, even in one party control of the House and the Senate.
Well, and again, of course, I remind you, we did have a Democratic president in 2015, but I've been here for 3 transportations and under various configurations. I've never seen a situation where this wasn't a bipartisan bill. All 3 of those actually made it into law. They were negotiated in good faith. I just don't think that's what's going on here. And I think it worries me because I actually agree that it's a desperately needed bill. I mean, I agree with my friends on the other side. It'll create a lot of jobs, it'll make a lot of progress. It's a good thing to do. But this bill, I think you probably summarized it pretty well at the beginning. We're going to vote for an extension, I suspect, at some point. We're not going to actually craft a bill. This bill really isn't designed to pass in divided government. So with that, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Well, thank you very much. And, I'm just listening to this exchange and, I'm sure my constituents and probably a lot of others in this country who might be observing these proceedings are scratching their heads saying like, what's the controversy here? I mean, a bill that invests in rebuilding our roads and our bridges and our water and sewer systems, which are crumbling all over this country. Money's dedicated to safe drinking water. We have places in this country where the drinking water is unsafe, where people get sick from drinking water out of their tap. Money's invested in expanding broadband. I mean, this pandemic has reminded us about how important it is for people to be able to hook into the internet, if for no other reason, for school, in the middle of this pandemic, monies for healthcare infrastructure, I mean, again, rail. I mean, all of these things are needed, and if the controversy is that we're investing in these ways that also have the added benefit of being good stewards of our environment and trying to deal with the global issue of the climate crisis, that somehow this controversial bill, it's still significantly less than what the president had told Mr. DeFazio that he might be interested in supporting. Boy, I mean, it goes back to what I said before. Maybe we just have a different set of values when it comes to some of the major issues before our country. But it's hard for me to believe that, outside of the Beltway, outside of, the polarization of Congress, that these are issues that are terribly controversial. But in any event, I may be wrong.
No, Mr. Chairman,
Sure.
if you would include Republicans in the negotiation, as you did in the first four bills that dealt with coronavirus, we actually got real law made. That's not what happened here. And as a result, we're not going to get anything done. And I know you want to get something done. I certainly do. But it's going to have to be bipartisan as long as Congress is divided. And right now, this bill just doesn't measure in that regard. So,
Going back, yeah, I mean, going back to the HEROES Act, I remember correctly, the Senate Majority Leader said we don't need to do anything else. And so that clearly was a non-starter, but maybe he's starting to hear from some of his rank and file Republican senators that we need to do something. And similarly, this is about, getting beyond this crisis and getting this economy moving into the future. I'm happy to yield to Mrs. Torres now. See here. Next.
Got to unmute.
Thank you. Yes. Thank
Sure.
you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate your comments and all of the work that has gone behind the scenes, getting this bill to where it's at. I also appreciate the committee working with my office, although we did not come to an agreement on an issue that is critically important to my district. I do appreciate the fact that they were willing to work with my office in the way they did. In Washington, representing my neighbors and community in California's Inland Empire. Some of you know the Inland Empire is a key logistics hub, not just for our region, but for the entire Western United States. Small businesses across America are the beating heart of our economy, but it is the airport, railways, warehouses, and interstates in my district that allowed that heart to beat. I assure you and appreciate the importance of surface transportation investments as much as anyone else speaking today. And I'm wondering why in the world we are considering a package right now that includes a provision that won't just cost my community jobs. It threatens to undermine the single largest employer in my district. 1,000 people in the Inland Empire earn their living working for California Steel. A full 8,000 people in my community have jobs that fall within California Steel broader economy footprint. All of them are about to feel the crush that this provision, the so-called Buy America provision, will bring. That's because this provision does more than encourage the use of American goods. It picks regional winners and losers in that process. It actually moves the goalpost as to how we define American-made steel. And I have thousands of American jobs in my district that hang in the balance as a result of these arbitrary semantics. To be clear, California Steel qualifies under the Buy American provision in our laws designed to encourage domestic production. But under the provision in this bill, it does not. That's because this isn't about choosing good steel over bad steel. It is about picking some steel companies over others. In fact, we should call this provision what it really is, not by America, but by East Coast. Because as far as steel is concerned, this provision enshrines into law that only East Coast steel counts and only East Coast steel workers matter, not California workers, not the workers in my district. Choosing favorites among production models may help some American workers, but the problem is it will harm American workers too. It's sad considering California steel is such a pillar in our community. When they purchased part of the shuttered Kaiser Steel integrated mill in 1984, they hired 1,000 workers who had been laid off when Kaiser closed. I've stood in that factory many times. I assure you, it is on American soil. I did not need a passport to go there because it is in the city of Fontana. It employs American workers and it makes American steel. Over the years, California Steel has invested more than $1 billion into their facilities. And they've never laid off a single employee along the way, not during the recession of 2009 and not now. We're talking about good paying jobs for a working class community. They are also great community partners, helping to fund and hosting on their property the Intech Center, a manufacturing training hub that has been recognized as a model for public and private partnership. A couple of years ago, I hosted then Secretary of Labor Acosta for a tour of the facility. He was in shock that such a thing existed in the US, where community colleges and small manufacturers could work together to facilitate training for the workers that they need. Many of the workers at that mill are veterans and former prisoners who have a second chance to contribute to society. This mill employs hard to employ workers. Some of these workers, by the way, were trained to also teach at the Intech Center. That's what we're declaring un-American in this provision. A company that has done well by its workers, helped build the community, and allowed thousands of people across the Inland Empire to earn a living and improve their lives. Surface transportation investments are much too important to this nation's prosperity to allow these types of provisions to sway private sector markets one way or another. Certainly too important for my community. And like each of you, my community is struggling right now with the COVID-19 pandemic. Many of our businesses are shuttered. Many of our workers are struggling to put food on their tables and keep a roof overhead. We are doing what we can right now to ensure that we have an economy to come back to when we can finally reopen our doors. We urgently need investment right now, but not the type of investment that leaves my constituents out. This provision is a kick in the teeth as we fight to get by. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you very much. Mr. Woodall.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have the pleasure of serving on the Transportation Committee with Chairman DeFazio, and so I got to sit in with he and Mr. Davis during those 24 hours of hearings. But I confess, during all of that time, I had not heard a story like the one that Ms. Torres just told, and I'd like to ask that question of the chairman. We often bring up in the Transportation Committee and here on the Rules Committee our concerns about corporations that are not good to their employees, about folks who do put profits over people, about folks who do cut and run at the first sign of trouble. But the company that Ms. Torres just described in California Steel that is employing the hard to employ that is going to bat for folks, even in economic downtimes. It's coming in and picking up the ruins of bankruptcy and putting a community back on its feet. Tell me about that decision. How was the decision made to prioritize Buy America in such a way that it leaves out Ms. Torres' constituency?
Well, actually, she offered that amendment for the school construction portion, and it was not germane to our committee. We did not mark up anything to do with school construction in our committee, so it was not offered in our committee.
So for all of the highway projects, all of the other work that the 1.5 trillion does fund, her constituents and that constituent company will be available to participate in all of those contracts?
I believe that this company imports its slab from China, and that is the issue. If they didn't use Chinese slab, they wouldn't have any issues. They'd be fully qualified under any of the provisions of the bills, as far as I know.
Well, I know that's the benefit of being able to have the hearings and get into the nitty gritty, because I know that constituency is going to want answers. And yes, if you show up to work for every day in a gritty, hot and dirty job, you feel like you're doing American work for American taxpayers, and I'm sure there's a budget impact on that as well. Let me go back to HR 22, the FAST Act, for a moment. Mr. Davis was a little modest when asked about it. He actually introduced that bill back in 2015, as I recall. Introduced it with bipartisan co-sponsors right off the bat, as I recall. What I don't remember, and I was a junior committee member at the time, and you may, Mr. Davis, is did we move the FAST Act through committee in one of those four corners agreements?
Absolutely, and that was the process I was talking about with Chairman Schuster. It was Republicans in control of the House and the Senate, President Obama in office, and the Republicans and Democrats on the House T&I committee were tasked with putting it together. The chair, the ranking member of the full committee, and then the chair and the ranking member of the Highways and Transit Subcommittee, which is the main reason why I asked Ranking Member Graves to appoint me as the ranking member of that subcommittee to be able to use that process again, but we didn't have that chance.
Well, my colleagues may not even know about a big four agreement, because most of you all work on partisan committees. Not so with Mr. Davis and Mr. DeFazio and myself. These big four agreements, and again, I wish we talked about this more, because folks back home don't even believe Congress operates this way. What that looked like under Republican control is that the chairman and who was a Republican, and the ranking member who was a Democrat of the full committee, and then the chairman of the subcommittee and the ranking Democrat on the subcommittee, if those four people didn't all approve of an amendment, then the entire amendment was rejected. So as a rank and file member, I'm trying to move a good idea through. I don't just have to write the Republican red meat bill that appeals to my chairman of the committee and chairman of the subcommittee. I've got to write the common sense amendment that's also going to appeal to the two ranking Democrats there. And it was an extraordinary process. And Mr. DeFazio, I talk about your committee all the time back home, because just as Mr. Davis was excited about serving there for those reasons, I too was attracted to it for those reasons. When was the decision made not to move the surface bill through in a big four kind of agreement?
As I've repeated to the ranking member and to you, when it became clear that we could not address climate change meaningfully and work it out with the Republicans, because someone said 2 out of 5 of the are from the Green New Deal. The Green New Deal has no legislative language. It sets hortatory goals. This bill is, the Green New Deal is a non-binding resolution of some sort. This is applying principles to deal with climate change. If you believe with climate change, we got to deal with fossil fuel pollution. The largest source of fossil fuel pollution in the United States of America is transportation, by far. So if you don't deal with it, you're not dealing with climate change. Now, if you don't believe in climate change, we don't have much to talk about on that issue.
Now, to be fair, I remember one of our committee meetings early on where you said, listen, we're going to work together on this just the way we always have. Now, there's going to be a climate title, and maybe we're not going to be able to get together on the climate title, but we're going to do everything else in partnership. As I viewed the process, I'm not one of the big four, I'm way down the dais, but as I viewed the process, I didn't see that partnership on all of the other titles. So I understand, in fact, you said so in your opening statement, that you've heard this is not a bipartisan, this bill's not bipartisan because it does include climate change. I would have said this bill is not bipartisan because no one ever reached out to a Republican along the entire process of crafting it. And I ask you because, golly, serving as the chairman of the Transportation Committee, when a surface title has to be authorized, that's big time game day, and nobody wants to see a surface bill not get done. And I recognize that our process on our committee has been hijacked by larger forces. Hence why we have Chairman Neal here, who I look forward to talking with in just a moment. But the roll call headline was, with no GOP input, stakeholders feel House Highway Bill may stall. Not partisan Republicans feel it, but folks who actually want to get something done. I think back to that HR 22. We increased transit funding in year one of HR 22 twice as much as a percentage as we increased highway funding. Over the life of the FAST Act, transit funding went up more as a percentage of transit funding than surface did. And no doubt that's largely attributable to you and your commitment and your passion for those pots. But we know what those dollars turned out to be because it actually became the law of the land. Had it just gone into the dustbin of legislative ideas, we would not have that data today.
Well, to the gentleman's point, as I said, there were 31 Republican amendments offered in committee to strip the climate provisions. There was, the bill is woven together in such a way that you can't separate climate. If you wanted to do it the way Barrasso did and throw in a couple of titles that could be enhanced or just thrown away, to get Carper on the bill. By the way, nothing has happened since it came out of committee. Nothing has happened on transit in the Senate. Nothing has happened on rail in the Senate. We're moving all those things in this bill. And, it would be impossible to, 31 amendments and your alternative would have no climate. Well, we just are not going to write a surface reauthorization in the 21st century that doesn't deal with the largest source of fossil fuel pollution, which we believe is contributing significantly to climate change, which we believe is real in addition to COVID.
I understand that that's going to be the place that we return. Again, it was the place that your testimony began. This isn't bipartisan because it includes climate change. As you know, the Republican alternative include the first resiliency title in my history of surface transportation bills. It's absolutely false. It is
resilience is not climate change. Resilience is looking at the reality of severe weather events, but not going to the source of the severe weather events, which is climate change.
It is
and sea level rise. That's what resilience deals with. That is not dealing with climate change. That says, well, the seas are rising for some reason, we better deal with it. That we're having floods like we've never had before. It's flooding highways, taking out bridges. We better deal with it, but we don't know what's causing it, and we're not going to deal with it. That's bottom line. We just totally disagree. Do you agree that fossil fuel pollution is something we should deal with meaningfully in this bill? Yes or no?
I don't just agree that fossil fuel pollution is something we should deal meaningfully in this bill. I believe that we have moved bill after bill after bill to make those incremental changes. And
I'd love to have you point them out because there's nothing in your alternative. It does zero on climate, zero, not an ounce of reduction of carbon.
I had the pleasure of being a part of a resiliency hearing here in the Rules Committee. And I can tell you that your very narrow definition of resiliency is not at all a reflection of the breadth of conversation that we had in the Rules Committee along those.
Great. So you do believe fossil fuel is a problem and climate change is real and you want to deal with it?
I promise you I'm driving more electric cars than you're driving, Mr. Chairman. My personal commitment and my policy making go hand in hand. And what is totally false is any suggestion that you make, and you make it over and over again, that you cannot find Republican partners on climate change. That is totally false.
I might be able to find a few, but not on the committee.
Reclaiming my time, what is totally true is that you have not reached out to Republicans on the committee to partner on climate change. My ranking member said to you specifically, nothing is off the table. I want to be involved in everything. And you made the decision, or someone made it on your behalf, that that partnership was not to be in this title. I sound energized and frustrated. I'm certainly not frustrated with my chairman. I have zero concerns about the love my chairman has for this country and for his commitment to transportation infrastructure.